If Great Britain goes down, the Axis powers will control the continents of Europe and Asia and Africa and Australasia and the high seas, and they will be in a position to bring enormous military and naval resources against this hemisphere. It is no exaggeration to say that all of us in the Americas would be living at the point of a gun. The people of Europe who are defending themselves do not ask us to do their fighting. They ask us for the implements of war, the planes, the tanks, the guns, the freighters, which will enable them to fight for their liberty and our security. There is no demand for sending an American expeditionary force outside our own borders. There is no intention by any member of your government to send such a force. The nation expects our defense industries to continue operation without interruption by strikes or lockouts. We must be the great arsenal of democracy. For us, this is an emergency as serious as war itself.
In our harbors, idle and rotting, lay ancient destroyers. They had been built for World War I, but this was World War II, and this gave us an idea. 50 tired, overaged destroyers were revitalized, transferred to Great Britain. In return, we acquired further protection of our shores. We received a chain of bases stretching from Newfoundland to British Guiana. These bases threw a steel wall around the Caribbean.
The Anglo-American Naval Agreement, whereby the United States exchanges 50 of her destroyers for a lease of British sites in the Western Atlantic, is causing much gnashing of teeth in the Axis countries. The newly equipped ocean greyhounds, which will now fly the British flag, are as welcome to us as the naval bases strung along the Atlantic seaboard are to America. This timely reinforcement of the Royal Navy, which is far stronger than at the beginning of the war, results also in America's Panama Canal region gaining valuable facilities for the defense of her vital interests. This get-together is one of the most heartening developments of the war. With British crews aboard, the ships are racing across the Atlantic to become another thorn in the side of Europe's gangster-in-chief.
79-year-old General Pershing, World War commander, implores his countrymen to strengthen America's defense by bolstering the British Navy.
No war was ever prevented by hiding the danger and by arguing that the danger does not exist. If a proper method can be found, America will safeguard her freedom and security by making available to the British or Canadian governments at least 50 of the overage destroyers which are left from the days of the World War. Today may be the last time when, by measures short of war, we can still prevent war.
In Chicago, at a rally of the Committee to Keep America Out of War, Colonel Lindbergh contradicts the soldier hero and himself, urging no foreign entanglements, but advocating cooperation with Germany if she wins.
In the past, we have built with a Europe dominated by England and France. In the future, we may have to deal with a Europe dominated by Germany. But we are often told that if Germany wins this war, cooperation will be impossible, and treaties no more than scraps of paper. I reply that cooperation is never impossible where there is sufficient gain on both sides, and the treaties are seldom torn apart when they do not cover a weak nation.
Without discussing the merits or the demerits of the proposal, the act of President Roosevelt in transferring 50 old-age destroyers in exchange for naval bases was a dictatorial act in defiance of the Congress and without the consent of the Congress, and also in defiance of existing law, the Constitution and the well-recognized principles of international law.
I have the profound conviction that the American people are now determined to put forth a mightier effort than they have ever yet made to increase our production of all the implements of defense to meet the threat to our democratic faith. As President of the United States, I call for that national effort. I call for it in the name of this nation which we love and honor, and which we are privileged and proud to serve. I call upon our people with absolute confidence that our common cause will greatly succeed.
Churchill and Roosevelt had only met once. They had met at a dinner in London in 1918 during World War I. Churchill never remembered the encounter. Roosevelt never forgot the fact that Churchill never remembered the encounter. But Churchill was arduously courting Roosevelt because he needed the help of the United States to survive, and Roosevelt was trying to give it. And what Churchill needed desperately were some World War I era destroyers to replace those being sunk by U-boats in Great Britain and the English Channel almost daily. And it's a long, complicated story, but they worked out a way to send the destroyers to Britain without seeking the approval of Congress. That was a very unusual thing, but he did it. Second, third-term presidents learned how to do things without Congress, and he kind of paved the way there. But there was an issue as to, but they had to be traded in return for something to satisfy U.S. law, and they had to be traded for access to British bases in the Caribbean and elsewhere in the Western Hemisphere, and that was to satisfy U.S. law. Well, Churchill was worried that Roosevelt was going to couch the thing in such terms that he would be getting the better of the bargain, and he didn't want that impression to reach London, obviously. So they couldn't work it out. So Roosevelt arranged a transatlantic conference call, and he put his Attorney General, Robert Jackson, on the phone. And Jackson tried to describe to Churchill the exigencies of U.S. law and why this had to be a trade, or as he said, it had to be a bargain. And Churchill said, empires just don't bargain. And Robert Jackson, the Attorney General, said, well, republics do. Roosevelt, to try to calm the waters here a little bit, said, you see, Winston, the trouble is I have an Attorney General, and he says I have to bargain. Well, said Churchill, maybe you ought to trade these destroyers for a new Attorney General.